Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Year's episode on the Amelie Moran podcast. Happy New Year. This year has been one of my favorites since ever being alive, to be honest. So I'm really excited to talk today about highs and lows and just get into the nitty gritty of everything that's gone on this year. I will also be talking about New Year's resolutions and I guess kind of how I feel about them, maybe how good I am at actually keeping or sticking to my resolutions. But for now, grab a glass of champagne, a cocktail, mocktail, glass of juice, cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever you want to be drinking this New Year's Eve, and let's get into it. Firstly, I want to just kind of reflect on Christmas, and obviously we've just had Christmas about a week ago. It was very, very strange having a hot Christmas, I will not lie. It was very, very odd because I'm used to being cozied up on the sofa, big jumpers, tracksuit, cup of tea or hot chocolate or something. I'm not very used to being in a summer dress for Christmas, which was really lovely, but obviously just a bit different. It was the first Christmas as well that I did sober. Might not sound like a big deal, but in the UK, drinking especially, and I'm sure in Australia as well, but drinking during the holidays is like a massive thing. And I've actually been sober for quite a while now, it feels like maybe a few months or something. I don't have any issues with alcohol. I don't want this to be a thing where I have any issues. It was more of a decision to not drink alcohol because actually every time I had alcohol over in Australia, I got really, really sick, and I don't know if it was an anxious thing. I don't know if it was my body physically rejecting it. I process alcohol very quickly. I'm that person that is having the hangover at the end of the night whilst everyone is kind of hitting their peak. I just don't know why. I just process it really quickly, and massive lightweight, to be honest. Doesn't take me a lot to get drunk, but it was very interesting to me. It was the first Christmas I didn't drink any alcohol, and usually I'm really into like the Prosecco and I love to have a glass of wine and things like that. And so it was very weird kind of navigating that, even though I know it doesn't feel like a big part of the day. In the UK, I would say drinking on Christmas is like a big thing and usually everyone gets drunk. I mean, that wasn't really the vibe for this Christmas. It was quite different, and it didn't feel that strange that I wasn't drinking in a way, but it was just something very different to me. Whilst everyone was having glasses of Prosecco, champagne, I'm kind of just there with my Sprite, and I'm not used to that. I know a lot of people have also chosen to go sober. I assume it's also going to be a big New Year's resolution for a lot of people, and just want to give a bit of comfort that actually it's completely fine if you're not drinking in situations. And I still had a really, really lovely time, lovely Christmas. There was no issue because I wasn't drinking. I just want to sort of offer it as a comfort blanket if you are doing dry January, or if you're deciding for this next year you want to cut alcohol out completely. It's fine. It's really not that big a deal. I think it's actually a lot nicer. You wake up the next day feeling completely fine, and you can still have a really, really lovely time. But moving on, this year has been such an overwhelming year. I feel like it's had so many highs, some lows, and I guess that kind of comes with traveling, to be honest. One major highlight for me for this year was being able to go and visit Ushuaia, which is the most southern part of Argentina in Patagonia, and I think its nickname is like the end of the world kind of thing. It's one of the closest points to Antarctica that isn't in Chile. I honestly just fell in love. It felt like I was in Narnia or something. It was so beautiful, and whilst we were there, Sam and I got to see penguins in the wild, and we got to see sea lions and lots of different wildlife. It's just so, so beautiful. And I feel really, really lucky that we got to go, because Argentina was not part of our plan at all. We were not even thinking about Argentina, I think because it's so big and it's such an overwhelming country that you just think, oh, I might just leave it out. I can't really even process that. And we actually ended up doing a full circle of Argentina, which I'll obviously get into as the podcast goes on. It was one of my favorite places and such a high, and it's also a place that I guess not a lot of people have traveled to. It is literally the end of the world, so it's not the most convenient place to sort of be, and it's very, very cold in winter. When we arrived, it was a massive snowstorm, so I think that also kind of contributes to the feeling of being like in Narnia, because it was just covered in snow. Absolutely stunning. Something to also maybe mention is that if you're passing between Argentina and Chile, make sure to go by bus. Do not fly. I know that it's more convenient to fly and it's obviously going to be a lot shorter of a journey, but the border between Chile and Argentina is the Andes. I mean, it is so, so beautiful. I absolutely loved it. Even if the border wait is extremely long and it's not the nicest process, absolutely loved it. And that sort of leads me on to my point of that a major highlight for me this year was finding that I think my one true love is snowy mountains. I don't know why, but when I am around snowy mountains or see snowy mountains, I feel so calm and so peaceful, and I just love them. And I think we started to see them when we were in Peru, and that was kind of the first indication of, okay, we're getting a bit colder now. And when you're in Ushuaia, it's almost like a seaside town. You have like a port and everything, and the entire town kind of sits on these mountains and the tops are all snowy, and it's just so, so beautiful. And I just absolutely fell in love with it all. And the reason I mentioned the border before is because one of my favorite films is Society of the Snow, which is about the men that crash landed in the Andes and I think survived something like 60 plus days or 60 days in the Andes with no food, no water, nothing. I searched up actually where the plane crashed when we were crossing into Chile in the snowy mountains or the Andes, and we weren't far off, really. That was quite scary to me because I'm standing there in a coat, I've got loads of layers on, and just thinking about what these people had gone through and being exactly where they'd been. It's quite special and also quite overwhelming in a way. I mean, it was absolutely stunning, but I cannot imagine what those people went through. Another major moment this year was also being able to see Machu Picchu. Learning about the history of the Incas and all of the spirituality in the towns surrounding Machu Picchu was honestly such an honor, and I feel really, really lucky to have been able to do the hike and to go and see Machu Picchu in the flesh. I just think the culture there is just so beautiful, and Sam and I found it so interesting. We were constantly researching because people don't actually know what Machu Picchu is and they don't know why it was built. We didn't know that prior to going, so it was really interesting just learning all of the theories, all of the reasons people think it's there, seeing other Inca ruins and what they represent, and just taking it all in and taking in a completely different culture, which obviously I talk about a lot on this podcast, but is one of the best things about going traveling, is being able to see these cultures in the flesh and really absorb everything you can from them. And finally, I guess a big moment that I can't really pass up talking about is the move to Australia. I have said this so many times on the podcast, but the culture shock of landing in Australia was absolutely real. And it was just so nice to know that we were going to spend time in one place instead of doing this 3-4 days hopping around that we'd been doing for so long. And it felt nice to be back in a bit of normality, shall I say. But we all have lessons from this past year that we may or may not have wanted to learn. But I will say one thing that this year has taught me is all about going with the flow. I'm still working on it. I can't say I'm 100% go with the flow type person, but I will say I do think I'm a lot better than before I went traveling or before we left. But obviously when you're away from your support network and everything that you know back home, and you go to these new places, these new countries, there are going to be things that are not planned that are probably going to mess with your head a little bit. I've definitely learned that it's better to just laugh at those situations, and there's no point getting annoyed about it. For example, if you miss a bus that is supposed to be taking you to your next destination, there is no point in getting annoyed about it. You might as well just laugh about it and make do. And I think that's one of the biggest things that travel can teach you, is just having to make do in situations where you weren't prepared for anything to go wrong. It can also then just be brought back into your daily life. And I really think I'm trying to incorporate this going with the flow into my daily life and a bit more sort of spontaneity, shall we say. But it's something I'm working on every day. I can't say I'm like perfect at it, and I definitely do still get quite stressed about certain things, but not much you can do. I even did a whole episode talking about Miranda Hart's book, where this is a big point or like a big lesson that she's learned. And that's just to laugh at yourself in these situations. And there's no point in getting annoyed or the plan didn't go as we wanted it to. You've just got to sit back and just accept fate and make it work. And like I say, that's something you really learn when you're traveling. For example, when Sam and I arrived at our Bolivia Salt Flats tour, it wasn't until about 20 minutes into a 3-day journey, so 20 minutes into a 72-hour journey, we realized that our tour guide, who would be with us for the 3 days, did not speak any English. Not one friggin' word of English. So I then had to translate best I could the entire 3 days. I mean, anything, if we were sitting for a meal, what everything was at the meal. If we needed instructions of when to meet him back at a certain point, I had to try and remember what he'd said or translate what he had said. Was it 20 minutes, 30 minutes? I can't remember. So it was definitely interesting. Very, very interesting. But we honestly just had to sort of laugh about it because we couldn't change it. We're in the car now. We're driving off into the salt flats. There's no point getting annoyed about it. I also think that this year has, without sounding too cringe or too cliche, I guess, is there is an entire world out there to explore, and there are so many adventures that we haven't done that we can't wait to do. And I think it's really taught me that actually travel is so important for your mental health and for yourself, just to take a break from the fast-paced everyday life and go and experience different cultures, people doing things differently, different foods, different ways of life. And I think it's really, really nourishing for yourself, and you can bring everything that you've seen back into your lives. And through that, I think I've seen that travel doesn't need to be this big journey that is 6 months long and you don't speak to anyone for 6 months. I think people can do it in such great short bursts. If you have some time off from work, you can take that week off and maybe fly somewhere different, or even maybe do a few days in a new country. For example, Europe is a really great place for that. Obviously, everything is really close knitted. I just think from the people that we met and seeing the people we saw, travel doesn't need to be this big, big journey where I'm taking 2 years off and I'm quitting everything. I think that isn't realistic for a lot of people. People need their jobs, they need the money, they have responsibilities. I do think that it's still just as impactful, even if you go for a weekend away and go to a new country you've not been to, or you book a trip for a week. It's also been such a year for learning about communication, especially when you're traveling with a partner or with friends or with anybody, to be honest. Sam and I have definitely learned that communication is the biggest thing that you need to either work on or actively do when you're traveling. Yes, you should do this in everyday life, but I just feel like everything is completely heightened when you're spending 24/7 with your partner or with your friends, whoever you're traveling with. Tensions are going to rise at points. When things that are unplanned happen and you don't know what to do, tension is going to be there. You may get stressed. You might not be. You might be one of those couples or those friends that is like, don't care, whatever. But as we've established, I'm not always like that. So communication has been a massive, massive lesson this year, and just voicing your needs, voicing your concerns, or even voicing how grateful you are for certain aspects of the trip or in your partner or your friend, I think can be so, so good. Not just for the relationship, but for your experience as well. There's no point going away with someone if you're both going to be miserable the whole time. But let's chat about New Year's traditions. How do I usually spend my New Year's Eve? I don't really have a routine for my New Year's. There's only one thing that I 100% do every year, but I don't always like go to a party, or I'm always staying in, or I'm always with a friend. I feel like my past few New Year's have been very, very different. Sometimes I'm at parties with friends. Sometimes it's just Sam and I chilling at home. Sometimes we're with our families. I feel like it changes up. I can't say that I have like a typical New Year's plan. Sometimes I might even go to a nice viewpoint with my family or with Sam, and we'll watch the London fireworks or something. So yeah, I don't really have like a typical New Year's, I don't think. But the one thing that I do every single year without fail, my mum is Spanish and she has drilled it into us every year since we were kids that we do Spanish New Year's Eve. So actually my New Year's Eve kind of happens at 11 p.m. UK time. Not necessarily that fussed about UK New Year's Eve. I don't know if that's bad, but we do the tradition where we eat the 12 grapes for good luck. If you don't know what this tradition is, I shall explain. It's a Spanish tradition where, specifically in Madrid, is where they kind of live stream it on the news. But what my family will do is we'll put on this Spanish TV streaming service, and it will be everybody in Madrid, the capital, and you have a champagne glass filled with 12 grapes. When it strikes midnight, the clock will gong 12 times, and you are supposed to try and eat a grape every second. It is so much harder than you think. I don't actually think I've done it in years properly. You're supposed to eat all of the grapes when the 12th dong has donged. And if you do, then it's good luck for the next year. And if you don't, it's meant to be bad luck for the next year. I've seen that some variations are going on TikTok where girls do it under a table. I feel like that's something to do with relationships maybe, or like love life. I don't actually know what that is. You can do it under the table if you want as well, but it's just something that my family and I do, whether I'm with friends, Sam's family, my family, whoever. We will always do the grapes. It's just such a nice kind of focal point for New Year's Eve, and as long as we've done that, I feel like we've kind of achieved a nice New Year's, to be honest. And it's just quite fun watching everybody around the room try and eat these grapes so quickly. Everybody's trying to exchange their grapes for smaller ones because you want to complete it. I mean, it's quite a fun game, to be honest. And believe it or not, if you think you're going to get good or bad luck, it doesn't matter. It's just a nice thing to do, I think, with a group of people. Also, can we talk about New Year's playlists, please? What is everyone putting on their New Year's Eve playlist? For me, I feel like the night has to start quite upbeat. Like, everyone needs to be dancing. I want it to be like good vibes. Everyone's singing along. I'm starting the night with like Dua Lipa, Georgia Smith, maybe Drake, Bruno Mars, SZA, Charlie XCX, that kind of vibe. Like, get the vibes going. And then as the night goes on, I am that person that will be putting on 2000s throwback hits. I will be putting on Neo, Rihanna, Justin Timberlake, Lily Allen, Florence and the Machine. I just love it. It just feels like such a, like, especially when you're with friends, that's the music you all grew up with. So it's so much fun. Everyone's singing along to this music that we all used to sing as kids. And I absolutely love it. I don't know if that's annoying for some people maybe, but let me know what is on your guys' playlist, because I feel like this is quite a big deal. But I have to confess, I am not somebody who sets New Year's Eve resolutions. I am that person that feels so pressurized by them. When I was a teenager, I would always set some out. I would write it in my notes app as like a checklist, and like when I completed something, check it off. But as I've gotten older, I couldn't think of anything worse, to be honest. I get really stressed out by that. I'd love to hear how you guys check in with yourselves for your resolutions, because I guess it also depends what people are putting down as their resolutions. If it's things like go to the gym, I get that, because you can kind of keep yourself accountable for that. But if it's something like give up sugar, there's no fucking way I'm not going to eat some chocolate this year. Like, you're telling me I'm going to get to September, October, it's going to start getting cold in the UK, and I'm not going to have chocolate. Like, what? It just, things like that are just like, that's not realistic for me. Why would I even pretend I'm going to go on this big health kick? It's not going to happen. I'm really overthinking it, but to me, it sounds more like a goal that I have 365 days to achieve. That is a lot. Like, that is a lot of time. I'm definitely the person that sets themselves smaller goals throughout the year when things come up. So if there's like something I really want to achieve with the podcast, or if I want to do something with my work, then I set myself those small goals and kind of check them off that way. I'm not someone who has like the long-term goals already planned out. I kind of set them throughout the year and work towards them. Like, I go into every year with personal goals and kind of general things like keeping health and, you know, like the things that obviously I want to make sure I'm maintaining. But then I just think about like the version of me in October next year, and I'm going to be like, I'm really overthinking it. Anyway. I think for this year, my goals were to go traveling because it was something I knew I was doing. And within that, I think one of my goals was to actually get on the flight to Mexico, because I was absolutely terrified of actually getting on this flight and having to do the thing I'd set out to do, even though I was also extremely excited and couldn't wait. I'm definitely proud of myself for achieving that, because there was a moment where I was like, I can't do this, after I'd said goodbye to my parents at the airport and didn't know, I don't have a return flight home, so I didn't know when I was coming back, or don't know when I'm coming back. It could have been 3 years that I was saying goodbye to them for. Like, I just have no kind of concept of that right now. And yeah, after saying goodbye to them and then having to go and check in all my bags and like really think about the trip that we were doing, leaving everything behind at home, I was kind of like, I don't know if I can get on this flight. This feels like a lot. That was a hard day, but also a great day, because I've, you know, it's led me to where I am now. But anyway, yeah, I kind of feel like that New Year's resolution for this year was kind of a cop out to go traveling, because I knew I was going to do that. But can people let me know what their resolutions are? Because maybe I'm thinking too specifically about them. I think I like to be a bit more generalized. I'm not going to say my intentions or my New Year's resolutions in this episode. I'm going to post a separate thing talking about it, because I want to try and do a sort of Vanity Fair Billie Eilish style thing where I can compare last year to the current year. So I want it to be something that I can look back on next year and kind of see what's changed or what's the same. And I think that will be a lot more interesting than me just going through personal goals and things that I want to do with the podcast in this episode. But looking ahead, I want to say that I'm honestly so grateful for everybody who follows the podcast, has watched a podcast episode, has interacted with any podcast episode. It honestly means the absolute world. I love doing this podcast so much. It's so much fun. And a great thing that I would love for you guys to do is to comment or DM me any topics that you want me to talk about in 2025. No topic is off the table. I'm happy to talk about whatever, whether it's travel, moving, or just even some girl chat. I think it will be really nice to just open up the table to whatever people want to hear about. Also, my life is going to be changing a lot this year. I will be moving back to London at some point, so I just want to take you guys along on the journey. And with that, the Amelie Moran podcast says goodbye to 2024 and hello to 2025. I can't wait to see what the year brings. Make sure to subscribe and like the podcast. I love you all and thank you so much for your support. I'll see you in the new year, and Happy New Year. Bye.